Hi, Jim.
How you doing?
I have zero complaints. How about yourself?
That's a good thing.
Yeah, I hope so.
You only go through life once, right?
Exactly, exactly. Good evening, Brad. When did you modify that hat?
Oh, months ago.
I mean,
Yeah, Greg Titcomb gave me a public shout out in a meeting, and it said that my hat was spelled incorrectly, so I did it
amazing,
just for him.
amazing. We'll wait a minute, minute and a half before we step into the formal meeting.
Good. I
Thanks as
got
always.
my,
You get
of
your
course,
note
yeah,
take,
got my
note taking.
document all set up. So,
Terrific,
yeah,
terrific. This might be depending on the attendance, this was either going to be a short one or a long one. If we had full attendance, I was going to move through some votes on potential initiatives, but if we don't have full attendance, um, you can see the agenda is fairly open. I've got updates from agenda items or from meeting minutes last week, or last month that I can update everybody on.
okay. And is my typing coming through? I just want to make sure if that's the case, I'll mute myself.
No typing coming through at all. Hi, Jessica. Nice to see you.
Yes, I'm your liaison.
Yes, I was like, oh, look at this. We've got perfect.
I'm back, but different role.
Understood. That's we we always feel both special and far more informed when a member of the select board is here to answer questions on the fly for us.
Great.
Hi, Dustin. I'm going to give it one more minute before we call to order. I know Tanya came a few minutes in came to the meeting a few minutes in last time. I didn't hear, at least not up until a couple minutes ago, I didn't hear from anybody else if they were not showing up. So at 7:03, we'll jump in. Pardon me. And Jessica and Dustin, I was just mentioning to Brad and Jim, if we had a full group here tonight, we would have more than likely voted on the next initiatives that we wanted to move in front of the select board, as well as a couple other things. It looks like we're going to have a smaller group than hoped for this month, which means we're going to have a relatively short meeting. We've got a mostly open agenda, but I've got some updates on some items we discussed last month that I was supposed to follow up on. So I can give updates when those make sense when we reach those lines in the agenda. Okay, so at 7:03, Brad, we'll call this to order. First of all, thank you everyone for joining us. Agenda tonight, first item as always is going to be the approval of the meeting minutes from last month. Given we only have two board members exclusive of myself, can I get oh, Tanya's here. Wonderful. Wonderful. Can I get a motion to approve last month's meeting minutes?
I move to approve last meeting minutes.
Great. And either Dustin or Tanya hit the unmute and second if you could.
I second that.
Terrific. Thank you. As has been our habit for the last at least half year, the agenda tonight starts off with a public forum in case any of the members of the public who are joining with us tonight have anything they want to bring in front of the committee. The floor is open for that now. And I'll also mention to the board and Jessica, we also have another space towards the end, the other business space that we can also cover off anything ad hoc as well.
I just had one update from the select board meeting. They are going to approve the budget for paving Pine Street. And so I asked if the money that was included in that would also be for putting down the striping to create the pedestrian and bike lane. And was told no, that there is no money in the budget for that. So that's an update because we had been told that they were thinking about doing that. So I just wanted to update you and to think about if there might be other.
Interesting. Okay, because when we had originally started the committee 2 years ago, and I know how certain budgets roll over and other ones don't, they had actually budgeted separately for that initiative.
Yes,
Okay, so there's no money there now for that.
that's what I was told at the meeting. That might be something that you might want to ask the select board about again. Coming from you and not from me, coming from the committee and not just from me, just to make sure that I didn't misunderstand them or didn't ask the wrong question. But that was my understanding, is that
Okay, got
there
it.
isn't money in the budget for that.
Got it. Understood. Brad, could you make a note that once we get in front of the select board, can follow up with that? Yeah, not only had there been money assigned to it, that money was based on conversations with a vendor. They had actually had a vendor lined up to do the work, and it
Right.
was just for want of an actual plan as far as distance from the sides of the road, thickness of stripes and things like that. Everything else had been taken care of. So
Right.
thank you very
I
much.
was a little bit surprised too, because that's what I remembered as well. But I think that it would be a good idea to ask and make sure I'm not wrong or
Yep.
didn't ask the wrong question. Just because I think that they would like to do the paving over the summer, sometime after May. So like June, July, August. So this would be the time to ask. And if I ask the wrong question, we can at least get clarification.
Yep, got it. Okay, thank you for that update. That actually merges with one of our follow-up items from last month's meeting. I reached out to Valerie and asked about what the overall plan for Pine Street was. And she connected me with Eric Coda, who most of you, if not all of you know, runs the town garage. He said that they are looking towards the end of June, depending on whether they add drainage or not. But it will probably be ground up down to dirt sometime in May in advance of that. So that is the news from that. And it looks like, okay, Dustin, you've got phone in. I was like, oh my gosh, is Kevin here? Like I saw another person
Yeah,
pop
that's-
up, but
Trying to get my computer to connect, and I'm on my phone right now, having computer issues.
okay,
But
got it. False alarm that we were gonna have a quorum. Any other public items for discussion tonight?
This could go at the end with other business, but I was witnessed to a reckless driving incident on the corner of Pine and North Street. I'm still waiting to receive the police report, basically summarizing that. I know that this committee can't fix stupid, but it definitely highlighted the fact that Pine Street is kind of an epicenter for where a lot of vehicles and pedestrian traffic kind of mix and come together. So I did meet with a couple of my neighbors after that incident had happened, and we do have some folks who are interested in the work that we're doing here and would love to add their perspective. So just kind of just understanding what the next steps would be, what information we should pass off to them to gauge their interest, and then also yeah, just for me, it's like, I know the work we're doing is important, but it also kind of highlighted in real time, like, oh, okay, yeah, this is really important, especially as as Pine Street is concerned.
Brad, would you be interested in sharing the photos, putting the photos on the share so that people can see where where the truck hit and how it actually, it's very much in the way of where people often walk, and oddly in a spot that people would typically see as a little bit more of a safe zone, given
Mhm.
that the truck actually crossed the center line and went across Pine Street and hit the telephone pole. It's pretty interesting to think of from the standpoint of pedestrian traffic on Pine Street.
Yeah, that specific area where they wound up crashing through is where the kids used to actually gather for the Red Cedar Bus School. So fortunately, it didn't happen during a time when everyone was waiting. But yeah, it was uh, pretty wild.
Okay, next agenda item is quarterly initiatives. I'm going to, unless anybody else has anything new to add to this, I think we're going to continue to have to wait on this. I'll do what I can to get a full attendance for next month so that we can vote on these and get them in front of the select board sooner or later rather than sooner rather than later, as it were. But unless anybody has anything new, and there's all the usual suspects as far as ideas here, the assisted crosswalks, finishing, oh, actually, Jessica, this might be a good one for you. One of the ones that we've been discussing and are obviously in support of for any number of reasons, do you know if there's been any further movement beyond they had done, I don't want to say survey with a capital S from the standpoint of like a surveyor out there, but continuing and finishing the crosswalk, or not the crosswalk, the sidewalk on Airport Drive? Have you heard anything about that?
They were talking about getting a bid for that, so I think that it is supposed to continue, but I didn't hear anything about like an expected date.
Okay, wonderful. So that's good for us to know. We won't, obviously we support it, but we wouldn't include it then in any kind of formal initiatives that we'd be putting forth any plan or suggestion for. We know that there had been a lot of, nothing that the select board does is informal. There had been a lot of work and interest in that back towards the end of last year, and we're just always curious. A lot of us walk that strip, and it's always so curious that there's this literal where the sidewalk ends moment that effectively is right where things start to get very interesting for
Right.
pedestrians.
What Valerie was talking about is, I guess, at some point this crosses over into school property, not town property. So they had to come to some sort of joint agreement that they both had the budget to do the project. And so it seems like from what she was saying, and you should check with her just to make sure, but from what she was saying, it seems like they have come to that agreement. They do both want to put in the sidewalk and next have to get bids. So that was my understanding.
Very interesting. Okay. I'm just sitting here thinking about, I'll have to go and look at and this is something I'll throw in a folder. I'll have to go and look at the state, parcel viewer, which delineates where those lot lines are. Because obviously the bike path that runs behind the baseball fields, that must be on rec field,
Yeah.
rec
Mhm.
property. Okay,
Yeah, so there's sort of several properties come together there,
got it.
including the rec department with the hub. And so there's a whole bunch of private and town and school properties that all come together. So and again, this was just a very quick thing that Valerie mentioned. So you should talk to her for more details. But she was just saying that they all had to come to agreement that they wanted to move forward with the project.
Got it. Understood. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have anything on the initiative side they want to discuss this month? Okay, those obviously are tightly connected to grants. We've, Jessica, in the interim, can't remember if it's one or two meetings that you hadn't been on since your election. We took to heart your suggestions and Ian's suggestions about when you attach an ask to a grant to the select board, it tends to move forward much more smoothly than if there was an ask without without any potential for funding. So what we've been doing is always talking about new initiatives and hand in hand with, okay, are there grants that we can tap into? Susan Grosso was on the call last month. Getting we've been getting some degree of awareness of some of the grants that are out there at the state level, as well as some national ones through her as well. So we'll regroup on that. I don't know. Is there anything that said, have you met with the town grant writer? What can you tell us about? Is there anything you can inform us about that process or anything like that?
I have not met with her yet. I think it would be really good though for us to ask for her to come to one of our meetings. Or if, the time is bad for her, that we could talk with her another time.
Okay.
I know that there are a number of grants coming up through VTrans,
Yeah.
so that would probably be a good time for us to talk to her,
Got it.
like
Okay,
sooner
perfect.
rather than later.
Yes, Brad, I assume you've already noted that. Yeah, I can't picture us honestly bringing anything in front of the select board from this point forward without having it at least in some way connected to a potential grant. So,
Although there is still on the select board agenda, there is still the continued consideration of village speed limits.
Mhm.
So that doesn't require extra funding. But yeah, I mean, I guess everything else you would probably have a more favorable reception if you had a funding source.
Okay, do you know if the speed limit change has been formally discussed in the last few select board meetings or few months?
No, it's in the town administrator's report, which is available online that Valerie puts on there. She keeps things on the agenda. So at the very end of it, it says upcoming agenda items.
Okay,
And that's where she moves anything that isn't resolved, just so that we have a record of what's still there. And so it's still on that list. And so what you would need to do is the committee would, through me or directly with Valerie, would just ask for that to be put on the agenda.
okay,
What they did in last year was they held, Jim might remember too, I think it was 2 public meetings. So they held 2 open public meetings for people to talk about the speed limit change. The first meeting was overwhelmingly in favor of reducing the speed limit. The second one wasn't very well attended. There were only about 3 or 4 people who came, but they all spoke out against it.
got it.
So they were worried about commute times to work. And so at that point, the select board just sort of stopped, right? So they got some people who were in support of it. They got some people who weren't in support of it. And so at that point, they said, okay, we should probably hold one more public meeting, but then that hasn't been put back on the agenda. So I think if you want it on the agenda, you could ask me to ask, or you can just tell Valerie directly, but it would have
Okay.
to be added to the agenda.
Okay, got it. We had gone from being supporters of it to being just passive observers because something that had been floated on one of our calls, and I don't know if it was game of telephone or what, but it's something that we need to follow up on as far as enforcement of the law, that there was a period of time after the change of the signs that the speed limit would not be enforceable. And the way it was communicated to us did not sound like the kind of thing that a state Department of Transportation would have written a law that the way it was communicated to us. It seemed odd and like an overcorrection without justification or something like that. So I never went and not that I make a habit of looking at, but I have been known to look up these laws. In fact, I've looked up 3 in the past year. Brad, if you could make a note just on just some further research for changes in town speed limits. Basically, I think Tanya and Dustin, I assume you remember this too. It was basically from the time you changed the signs, there was a period of time, an uncomfortably long period of time where that speed limit wasn't enforceable, even though the signs had changed and even though the speed limit itself had been changed at the town level.
So that's
Um,
only that's just for East Main and West Street. So all of the other streets are directly controlled. The speed limits are directly controlled by the select board. So it's just a vote. They determine what the speed is.
Okay,
And then once the signs are changed, it can be enforced as soon as the signs are changed.
so it only had,
What Bruce was saying is that he would prefer a period of education for the beginning where he gives people warnings, which is a lot what he does anyway, right?
Yeah.
Just educate people. But so for East Street, Main Street, and West Street, that is that's a state highway. And so the process for changing that, what Bruce and the select board seemed to come down on was that they could change it themselves, but that they wouldn't be able to enforce it right away. Or if you wanted to enforce it right away, you have to apply through the state so that the state will change it. And there's a paperwork process that you have to go through to do that. Mike Winslow, the transportation planning at the Addison County Regional Planning Commission, Mike Winslow, who's in charge of transportation, he collected the data about the average speed already. So you submit that. Based on that, there wasn't a case to lower the speed limit because it's basically based on how fast people are already driving. So, but what he said is that there's an exception process where if you have things like, on Main Street where everybody's backing up into the lane of traffic and can't really see oncoming traffic, or if you have a lot of driveways that come out onto the road and they can't really see the traffic, those are the sorts of exceptions that you could fill out in the paperwork, and you would have to take pictures of it, and you could submit an application to the state. And so that's what we learned through that process.
Yeah.
It looks like
Jim?
Jim has something to add too.
yep, Jim?
I think you better hold off and check further on that. I think you have your process a little mixed up. There has to be a traffic study. There has to be a consensus by the community to change it. If the select board wants to change it, Jessica's right. For a period of time, you cannot enforce it. Just because you put signs up doesn't mean you can enforce the speed limit right away. There's a period of time that you cannot. So I would check with the chief of police on this before you go any further on that. It's a different process. And the state highway, West Street, Main Street, and East Street up to the Lord's Prayer Rock, I believe, is still within the old village designation. After that, it becomes state highway going out of town both ways. So you ought to check with Valerie or the chief on that to make sure, okay? Just so you guys don't run off and do something you shouldn't be doing.
Got it.
Yeah. And so Mike Winslow has already done the first part of what Jim was talking about, the information collection. And so I can, if it's something you want to move forward with, I can put you in touch with him and you can collect that information from him. He's also, an expert on this topic. So he's the one who talked us through the process if you want to change it.
And again, our role was always supplemental. It was supportive of the effort, but we weren't, and the select board had never asked us to get in front of it or anything like that. And then right up to the point where there was a point where I think Ian at one point shared that there was actual traffic data, there was actual speed limit data or speed data from within the village district. But then not a meeting later, I think it was when the open meetings were happening and they parked the idea. So, it wasn't something that we were off the front of at all. But it's good to know that it's at least still in people's minds. So let's see. We'll move on to other business. I have a follow-up from last month. I mentioned last month that in May, there's the Human Powered Parade coming up, which the rec department is involved in. And I have some further further information about that. I think it is going to be on May 18th. I noted the route will be published. It's around the Village Police District. It starts off at the hub. We were looking for 1 or 2 volunteers to help out at a couple of the intersections. A couple new things that I have are the event itself is going to start at 10 a.m. as far as people meeting at the hub. There's going to be a BMX show at 11:30. Parade itself starts, or 10:30 rather. Parade itself starts at 11. I'll forward all of this afterwards. But by 10:45, they want to have the volunteers at the street corners to assist with directing riders and walkers. And then after the last people are done, you head back to the field, and that's typically, I believe they think that's going to be around noonish. So in email, I will note to everyone after this. I'll just ask if anybody's interested in volunteering. Hopefully we can get 1 or 2 people to help out with that. And I noted at the last meeting that a couple human powered parades ago, we actually had a pretty good showing there. We had a little booth there, and we provided rolling support behind the parade for fixing anybody's bikes that were breaking down along the way. So it's a fun event. Hopefully the weather's good. The turnout's usually good, and it's always a kind of a cool freak show of what kind of bikes people show up with. So I'm just checking before we wrap up here, any other things. I have a note here. I've got to forward I did not do this yet. I've got to forward the draft community survey from Susan to you all to make comments on it. Again, my feelings were that the majority of the questions that they had staged in it were very heavy on demographics and a little bit lighter on use, which is what we were trying to get out of the survey itself, so that we would have some objective information that we could present in support of any types of initiatives that we were going to put forward just around average use or typical users within the village district. Looking at the notes too, I think don't have anything else really to follow up on, at least not insofar as any of the real action items were there. I noted the Pine Street thing already. I noted last month that those things that were at Bristol Works are actually bus stops. And otherwise, that's about it. The last thing I'll ask is actually of Jessica. Jessica, you had previously forwarded me a handful of names that would be potential board members. You being our liaison, at least for this month, what do you recommend our role should be in that process, knowing that we've had to help replace board members before, but I'm not 100% sure that the way we did it is the most efficient way. So are there any suggestions you have for us based on that?
Yeah, I mean, if anyone wants to join the committee, all they need to do is email Valerie and let her know. I mean, we're looking for volunteers, so
Yeah.
there are other committees too that need volunteers. So
Yes.
so anyone you can reach out to. The people that I've reached out to are all really supportive, but you know, they're parents with young children, and they just feel like they can't do it right now. So far, I haven't had much luck. So
Okay.
if you all know people and want to reach out, that would be good. And I'll keep doing that also.
Got it. That's good to know. I'll revisit that list. I have kind of a canned pitch that I use for it that both you and Brad should be familiar with. There's also a couple people from the last wave that we reached out to and showed interest as well. That we could go. It's perfect time to do it actually now with it warming up, at least with one of the people. I can reach out to them. Okay, Jessica, I'll go revisit that list from the email you sent to us, and then we'll proceed accordingly. Does anybody else have any other items for discussion this month? Then I'll ask for a move to adjourn.
I I move to adjourn, or do I second?
No,
Whatever
you,
the
you,
correct
no, you
verbiage
move
say.
to adjourn. You
I move to adjourn.
And then someone else can second.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, great. Brad, if you could note that we adjourn at 7:29 tonight. With that, it's great seeing you all. Jim, thanks as always for joining us. And thanks a lot for the input on the speed limit thing. We very much appreciate that. I will forward a couple things on via email, and I'll also put information about the parade in there as well. Okay? Thanks a lot, everyone.
It was
Thanks,
good to see
everybody.
you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.